There comes a time in life when the world doesn't just test you, it tries to break you. It pokes at every wound, every insecurity, every button you've got. People will lie about you, betray you, talk down to you. They'll try to make you feel small because your peace reminds them of the war inside themselves. And if you're not careful, if you're not trained, you'll react. You'll snap. You'll lose control, and that's exactly what they want. But I'm here to tell you, you were not made to be reactive. You were built for resilience. You were born with the power to choose peace over chaos, stillness over storm, strength over drama. This is about learning the art of stillness in a shaking world. Because storms will come, people will provoke, and life will throw its punches. But the real strength, it's not in swinging back. It's in standing still. It's in breathing through the madness. It's in not letting their fire ignite yours. You don't let them control the thermostat of your emotions. You train your mind, you train your spirit, you train your reaction, until peace becomes your automatic response. That's not weakness. That's power. Every moment in life offers us a choice. Not always between right and wrong, or good and evil, but between reaction and response. There's a thin line between those two, but the consequences they bring are worlds apart. In the heat of the moment, when your emotions are high, when someone says something that hits a nerve, or when life throws an unexpected challenge your way, that's when the real battle begins. Not with the other person, but within yourself. The power lies in the pause. That small, often unnoticed space between what happens to you and what you choose to do next. That pause is your sanctuary, your battlefield, your test, and your training ground. Most people go through life reacting. They speak before they think. They act before they understand. And more often than not, they regret the damage they leave behind. Burned bridges, broken trust, missed opportunities. But what if you trained yourself to pause, even just for a breath? What if, instead of snapping back, you took a moment to assess what's really happening? That's not just maturity. That's mastery. Because in that pause, you reclaim the power that the situation or the person tried to take from you. Think about it. How many times have you wished you had said less, walked away sooner, or responded with more grace? Those regrets don't come from weakness. They come from untrained reactions. But every time you pause, you prove to yourself that you're not a slave to your emotions. You are their master. The ability to pause is like building a muscle. It doesn't come naturally to most people, but it can be developed, strengthened, and sharpened like a sword. It starts with awareness. You begin to notice the triggers. You feel the heat rising in your chest, the tension in your hands, the racing thoughts in your mind. And instead of letting them control you, you stop just for a second. You pause. That pause is where transformation happens. In that space, you ask yourself, is this response worth my energy? Will what I say help or hurt? Is reacting right now going to solve the problem or make it worse? And most of the time, when you truly pause and reflect, you'll find that your initial urge to lash out is rooted in ego, fear, or past pain, not truth or wisdom. The pause helps you see that. It gives you time to breathe, to reset, and to choose a path that aligns with your values, not your emotions. Now, don't confuse pausing with weakness. There is nothing weak about holding back. In fact, it takes more strength to stay silent than to shout. It takes more power to breathe through it than to break down. That pause, that's where your real character is revealed. Anyone can be calm when everything's going their way. But can you be calm when you're being misunderstood? When you're being judged? When you're being pushed to your edge? Can you hold your peace when everything around you is trying to steal it? That's the challenge. That's the calling. That's the growth. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. Soon, you'll notice yourself reacting less and observing more. You'll feel the emotions rising, but you won't let them dictate your actions. You'll become a person of composure, someone others look to in crisis, someone who carries peace like armor. And here's the truth. When you master the pause, you stop being manipulated by other people's behavior. They can yell, lie, insult, provoke, but they don't get to control how you move. That's your choice. That's your freedom. That's your superpower. It's not about being emotionless. It's about emotional intelligence. It's understanding that anger, frustration, sadness, they're all valid feelings, but they don't have to drive your decisions. When you pause, you give those emotions space to exist without letting them take the wheel. You become the driver, the leader, the commander of your own ship. And that kind of self-control radiates strength. People notice it. They respect it. They might even be intimidated by it, because they realize they can't manipulate you like they do others. You're not reacting on cue. You're not dancing to their chaos. You've built something stronger inside. That kind of power is rare. But it's not unreachable. It's trained. It's practiced. It's chosen. Over and over again. Especially when it's hardest. Especially when it feels unfair. Especially when you feel like defending yourself, proving your point, getting the last word. That's when the pause matters most. Because in those moments, it's not about being right. It's about being wise. It's about protecting your energy, your purpose, your peace. It's about realizing that not every battle deserves your presence. Some things are better left unanswered. Some people thrive on your reaction. Don't feed them. Starve them with silence. Starve them with stillness. Starve them with strength. When you master the pause, you become untouchable in a way. Not because you don't feel, but because you feel everything and still choose control. That kind of maturity will take you places reaction never could. It will open doors, build bridges, heal wounds, and elevate your life in ways you never imagined. It will change your relationships, your career, your self-image. Because when people know you're not easily shaken, they treat you differently. And more importantly, you begin to trust yourself more. You begin to respect the person you see in the mirror, not because they're perfect, but because they're growing. And growth is never easy. It requires sacrifice. The sacrifice of ego. The sacrifice of temporary satisfaction. The sacrifice of being right all the time. But what you gain is far greater. Peace of mind, clarity, confidence, and a life that's not driven by impulse, but by intention. So train yourself. Not once, not twice, but daily. Train your mind to breathe. Train your soul to wait. Train your tongue to hold back. Because in the stillness of that pause is the strength that separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. That pause is your greatest ally in the pursuit of self-mastery. It is your anchor when the winds of emotion try to sway you. And once you embrace it, once you master it, you'll never go back. Because you'll have tasted the power of choosing calm, and nothing, not even the loudest storm, will ever be louder than your stillness again. Peace is not something you find by accident. It's not luck. It's not something people hand to you. It's something you build. You craft it from the inside out, choice by choice, day by day. You protect it like it's your most valuable possession, because in truth, it is. Peace is power. And when you learn to protect your peace, you learn to control the one thing nobody else can, your internal world. People will try to disturb that world, not because they have something against you personally, but because they haven't made peace with themselves. And when someone isn't at peace with themselves, they won't allow you to be at peace either, unless you refuse to let them in. That's why you have to stop looking at peace as a luxury and start recognizing it as a necessity. When your mind is calm, your decisions are better. When your heart is steady, your relationships are stronger. When your spirit is still, your direction becomes clear. But all of that can fall apart the moment you allow someone to step into your space and dictate your emotional climate. Think about that. How often have you let one person's words, one person's mood, one person's opinion control your entire day? You were fine before that conversation. You were focused, motivated, clear. But then they brought their storm to your door, and instead of shutting it, you stood in the rain. The truth is, not everyone deserves access to your emotions. Just because someone has something to say doesn't mean you have to take it in. Just because someone is upset doesn't mean you have to match their energy. Just because someone wants to argue doesn't mean you have to step into the ring. That's where your peace becomes your power. Because when you stay calm in the face of chaos, you're not ignoring the storm. You're rising above it. You're saying, I see what's happening, but I choose not to be moved by it. That's not indifference. That's discipline. That's maturity. That's strength. We live in a world where everything is loud. Social media news, people shouting to be heard, everyone reacting, everyone triggered. But peace doesn't shout. Peace is quiet. Peace is subtle. Peace is the quiet confidence that says, I don't need to respond to this. It's the silent wisdom that whispers, not everything requires my energy. And once you embrace that, once you make peace your priority, your life begins to shift. You stop chasing validation. You stop explaining yourself. You stop engaging in conversations that lead nowhere. Instead, you become grounded, focused, intentional. And here's something most people don't tell you. Peace isn't passive. It's active. It's not just sitting in silence with your eyes closed. It's walking through a chaotic environment and staying unshaken. It's hearing criticism and choosing not to let it define you. It's facing pressure and deciding you'll respond with purpose, not panic. That takes effort. That takes self-awareness. That takes practice. But more than anything, it takes a decision. You have to decide, right here, right now, that your peace matters more than their approval. That your calm matters more than their chaos. That your energy is too valuable to waste on anything or anyone who doesn't deserve it. Sometimes people will call you cold for choosing peace. They'll say you're distant, or detached, or emotionless. Let them. That's not your concern. Your concern is your growth, your healing, your sanity. And peace is the foundation of all three. You can't grow when you're constantly reacting. You can't heal when you're constantly triggered. You can't think clearly when you're constantly defending yourself. But when you make peace your mission, you create space. Space to reflect. Space to understand. Space to move with intention, not impulse. You start to realize that every argument doesn't need your voice. Every situation doesn't need your presence. Some things, some people, some moments are best left untouched. Not because you're avoiding, but because you're choosing. Choosing not to lower your energy. Choosing not to step into unnecessary drama. Choosing not to waste your breath trying to convince someone who's already made up their mind. That's power. That's leadership over your own life. And the more you practice it, the more it becomes your second nature. You don't get dragged into battles that don't belong to you. You don't get lured into conversations that only drain you. You don't allow temporary emotions to cause permanent damage. And eventually, people start to notice. They realize they can't rattle you. They can't bait you. They can't manipulate you into reacting the way they want. You become untouchable, not because you're disconnected, but because you're deeply connected to something bigger. Your purpose. Your path. Your higher self. And that energy, that clarity, that calm, it changes everything. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You move slower, but your steps have more purpose. You let go faster, but your heart is stronger. Because you've built your life on peace, and no one can shake what they didn't build. There will still be moments when you're tempted to lose it. When someone says just the right thing to get under your skin. When life throws a curveball and you feel the pressure rising. But in those moments, you return to what you've trained. You breathe. You pause. You remind yourself, my peace is not up for negotiation. You protect it. You hold it. You honor it. Because peace isn't just how you feel. It's who you're becoming. It's the result of every time you chose not to fight, not to shout, not to fall apart. It's the reward of every time you rose above the noise and said, I choose peace. So let the world spin. Let people talk. Let storms come. You don't have to stop them. You don't even have to respond to them. All you have to do is stay grounded in who you are and what you stand for. And if peace is what you stand for, then you've already won. Not because you fought harder, but because you didn't have to fight at all. You simply chose to rise. There is something deeply powerful about being able to feel every emotion fully, and yet not be moved to act on any of them without thought. That is emotional control. That is self-mastery. It is not about being cold. It's not about shutting yourself down. It's not about pretending you don't hurt, that you're not frustrated, or that things don't bother you. It's about feeling it all. Every ounce of it, and still being able to say to yourself, I will not be ruled by this. Because the truth is, life will always give you reasons to lose your temper, to react impulsively, to break down in front of people who don't even deserve access to your vulnerability. But when you master your emotions, you stop being owned by external circumstances. You take back your power. In a world that teaches you to respond quickly, to clap back, to defend yourself at every turn, emotional control is a revolutionary act. It is the quiet refusal to let someone else's behavior dictate your response. It is the understanding that maturity is not measured by how fast you can argue back, but by how well you can hold your composure in situations that used to break you. Self-mastery begins the moment you realize that not everything needs to be said, not every provocation needs a reaction, and not every emotion is worthy of your time and energy. The journey to emotional control isn't easy. It requires daily effort. It means recognizing your triggers. It means sitting with discomfort instead of numbing it or releasing it in ways that hurt you or others. It means pausing when all you want to do is lash out. That pause, that moment of stillness, that space between the stimulus and your response. That is where mastery is formed. And it doesn't always feel good. There will be moments where your chest burns with the heat of unspoken anger. There will be times when silence feels like swallowing glass. But over time, you'll begin to see that what you gain in those moments is far greater than what you would have lost by reacting. When you react out of anger, you surrender your self-respect. When you speak from pain instead of clarity, you risk damaging relationships you value. When you let fear drive your choices, you shrink. But when you stay calm, you stay in control. You start to see things for what they are, not what your emotions are painting them to be. You respond with wisdom, not wounds. You act from truth, not temporary feelings. And that shift, that transformation, is the beginning of a different kind of power. The kind that can't be shaken. The kind that doesn't need validation. The kind that builds legacies. Emotional control also helps you move through life with more clarity. When your heart is in turmoil, when your mind is clouded with feelings you haven't learned to regulate, your vision becomes distorted. You begin to interpret everything through the lens of your pain, your insecurity, your past. But when you've learned to manage those emotions, you see more clearly. You listen more deeply. You judge less harshly. You begin to live from a place of balance, not chaos. You're no longer at the mercy of your moods. You make decisions based on purpose, not pressure. It's important to remember that control doesn't mean suppression. You're not ignoring your feelings. You're not pretending you don't have emotions. You're simply choosing the right time and place to process them. You're honoring yourself by not spilling over onto people who didn't cause your hurt. You're owning your reactions instead of letting them own you. That's not emotional suppression. It's emotional intelligence. It's being smart enough to know when to speak, when to wait, and when to walk away. You start to notice how peaceful your life becomes when you stop fighting every emotion and start understanding them. You don't fight your anger. You acknowledge it. You ask, why am I angry? You listen to what it's telling you. Maybe it's telling you a boundary has been crossed. Maybe it's pointing out an unresolved hurt. But you don't become the anger. You don't act on it immediately. You understand it. That understanding becomes power. That awareness becomes strength. That reflection becomes your guide. This is the difference between people who live with regret and people who live with purpose. Imagine how different your relationships could be if emotional control became your norm. How many arguments could be avoided? How many misunderstandings could be cleared? How much damage could be prevented? People who cannot regulate their emotions are always hurting the ones they love. They speak from pain, act out of fear, and apologize only after the destruction is done. But when you're committed to mastering yourself, you become safer. Not just for others, but for yourself. You stop being a danger to your own peace. You stop creating chaos you then have to clean up. This journey also leads to confidence. Because when you know you can trust yourself not to crumble in high-pressure moments, you walk with a different kind of strength. You no longer fear confrontation because you know you won't lose control. You no longer fear being triggered because you've trained yourself to respond with intention. That kind of self-trust is rare. Most people fear their own reactions. They don't trust themselves not to snap, not to cry, not to shut down. But when you've trained your emotional muscles, you become someone you can rely on in every situation. And that changes everything. Emotional control doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care deeply, but you refuse to let that care turn into chaos. You care enough about your peace not to let it be disturbed. You care enough about your relationships to pause before you speak. You care enough about your future to not let temporary emotions cause permanent consequences. That is love. That is strength. That is leadership. In every hard moment you'll be given a choice, to be reactive or to be responsive. To let the emotion drive the car or to put it in the passenger seat while you steer. Choose wisely. Choose calm. Choose power. Choose mastery. And as you keep choosing, you will keep becoming. You'll become someone who no longer fears their emotions but respects them. Someone who no longer loses time to anger but invests time in clarity. Someone who no longer destroys relationships with words but builds bridges with patience. This is what emotional control gives you. Not just peace in the moment, but a foundation for a better life. One that's not dictated by what happens outside, but grounded in what you've built inside. So don't be afraid to feel. Just don't let your feelings make decisions for you. Be honest about what you feel. Be gentle with what you feel. But above all, be wise in how you move through those feelings. That is how you master yourself. And when you master yourself, nothing can master you. One of the most important lessons you'll ever learn in this life is that not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table of your emotions. Your energy, your mood, your peace of mind. These are sacred things, and yet too often, people hand them over like they're worthless. One person cuts them off in traffic, and the whole day is ruined. One negative comment on social media, and suddenly their confidence is gone. One argument with someone who doesn't even matter, and their whole mindset shifts. But the truth is, if you keep giving people the remote control to your emotions, you'll keep living your life like a puppet on a string, moved by every tug, pulled in every direction, and constantly off balance. It doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to hand out your emotional responses like free samples. You don't owe everyone a reaction. Just because someone wants to argue doesn't mean you have to participate. Just because someone disrespects you doesn't mean you have to match that energy. Sometimes silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's growing up. There's power in knowing when something doesn't deserve your time. There's strength in choosing not to engage. Because every time you react, every time you let someone else's behavior pull you out of your calm, you give them control over your life. And control is not something you give freely to anyone. You have to ask yourself who really deserves access to my emotional world. Who has earned the right to impact how I feel, how I respond, how I move through my day? The answer is probably very few people. And yet, so many of us allow strangers, coworkers, toxic friends, exes, and even social media posts to dictate our inner peace. Why? Because we haven't set boundaries. We haven't trained ourselves to pause and think, is this worth my energy? But the moment you start doing that, truly filtering what deserves a response and what doesn't, you start reclaiming your life. You start moving with intention. You start rising above. This doesn't mean you become emotionless. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start choosing. You choose what you allow to affect you. You choose what gets your attention. You choose what gets your reaction. And that choice, that conscious decision, is the foundation of emotional maturity. It means you're no longer living on emotional autopilot. You're not reacting just because something triggers you. You're observing, evaluating, and then deciding, is this aligned with the peace I've been working so hard to build? When someone tries to provoke you, they are often looking for a response to validate their own chaos. They're hoping to drag you into their storm because misery needs company. But when you don't react, when you keep your center, when you stay grounded, you deny them that satisfaction. You show them, and yourself, that you are not so easily shaken. And that kind of control, that kind of calm, creates a ripple effect. Suddenly, you start showing up differently in every area of your life. You don't let small people pull you into small conflicts. You don't let petty moments steal hours of your peace. You rise above, not because you're better, but because you've chosen better. There is a kind of confidence that comes from knowing that you don't owe your emotions to just anyone. You don't have to react just because you're provoked. You don't have to argue just because you're challenged. And you certainly don't have to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your peace is not a public discussion. Your mood is not a public playground. You get to decide who gets close enough to influence how you feel. And once you learn to guard that inner space, you'll begin to realize just how much energy you've wasted in the past on things that never mattered. Not every battle is yours to fight. Not every insult deserves your reply. Not every situation requires your presence. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away with your dignity intact and your spirit unshaken. People will call you arrogant for protecting your peace. Let them. People will say you've changed. Let them. Growth will always offend those who are still committed to chaos. But you're not here to please everyone. You're here to live in alignment with who you are becoming. Imagine living a life where you only engage in conversations that elevate you, only surround yourself with people who respect your boundaries, only focus on goals that align with your vision. That life begins the moment you stop handing out emotional access like candy. The moment you stop reacting to every opinion. The moment you stop trying to prove yourself to people who were never listening anyway. When you stop giving everyone the remote control to your emotions, you stop being controlled. You start living with freedom. Every day, you are presented with opportunities to react. Someone cuts you off. Someone says something rude. Someone brings drama into your space. And every time you have a choice, give them your peace or protect it. The more you protect it, the more powerful you become. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. You become a person who doesn't just survive storms, you walk through them untouched. You become a person who doesn't need to be loud to be heard, who doesn't need to fight to win, who doesn't need to prove to matter. This level of control isn't easy. It takes work. It takes discipline. It takes a daily decision to prioritize your well-being over temporary satisfaction. But once you start, it becomes addictive. You start to feel the difference. You start to notice how light your spirit feels when you're not constantly dragged into drama. You start to see how clear your mind becomes when you're not cluttered with other people's noise. And you begin to attract peace. Not just in your inner world, but in your outer world too. Because peace loves company just as much as misery does. You are not here to be at the mercy of people's moods. You are not here to be the dumping ground for other people's emotional baggage. You are not here to constantly explain yourself to people who don't even try to understand. You are here to live, to grow, to create, to love, and to protect the person you are becoming. And that person, your highest self, does not hand out emotional access without discernment. So take the remote back. Reclaim your focus. Guard your energy like your life depends on it, because it does. Every reaction you don't give, every argument you don't enter, every battle you don't fight is a step toward emotional freedom. Choose that freedom, live in that freedom, and never again let anyone else decide how your day is going to go. That power is yours. It always has been. Every choice you make, every response you give, every time you decide to pause instead of react, you're not just shaping your own life. You're shaping the world around you. You're setting an example, even when no one is watching. Because when you choose calm over chaos, peace over pettiness, restraint over retaliation, you're rewriting the script that may have been passed down to you. You're breaking the generational habits of yelling, arguing, emotional outbursts, and unresolved trauma. You're stopping the cycle that told you that strength is loud and that silence is weakness. In reality, true strength is often silent. It stands tall without raising its voice. It endures without needing to explain itself. And when you learn to walk in that strength, you change more than just your own story. You change the future. There are people in this world who grew up surrounded by chaos, who learned from a young age that love was loud, that conflict was normal, that rage was a form of communication. Maybe you were one of them. Maybe you watched people explode in anger just to feel heard. Maybe you grew up believing that whoever shouted the loudest was the one who had power. But now you have the chance to do something different. Now you have the opportunity to build a new path, one paved with patience, awareness, and emotional intelligence. And make no mistake, this isn't easy. You will be tempted every day to revert to old ways, to match people's energy, to raise your voice, to fight fire with fire. But what happens when you stop passing that fire down? What happens when the heat ends with you? That's what legacy looks like. It's not always about money or status. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can pass on is peace. The kind of peace that says, in this house we listen, we speak with care. We don't let anger lead us. We don't hurt each other just to feel powerful. Every time you pause instead of snapping, every time you walk away instead of escalating, every time you breathe through the tension, you're doing something revolutionary. You're showing that emotional control is possible, even in the most triggering situations. You're proving that there's a better way. Think about the people watching you, your children, your siblings, your friends, your co-workers. They're learning from you. They're observing how you handle pressure. They're paying attention to how you respond when someone disrespects you or pushes your buttons. And when they see you stay calm, they learn that they can too. You become a model of emotional stability, not because you're perfect, but because you're intentional. And in a world full of noise, that kind of intention is powerful. It's magnetic. It draws people in and inspires them to be better, not because you told them to, but because you showed them how. You also begin to feel lighter. When you stop reacting to every slight, when you stop trying to win every argument, when you stop allowing others to hijack your peace, you create space. Space for reflection, space for clarity, space for love. And you begin to see how much of your life was consumed by unnecessary emotional battles. Battles that drained you, distracted you, and delayed your growth. But when the war within you ends, you no longer feel the need to fight battles outside of you. You become anchored, rooted, immovable. And that sense of grounding doesn't just benefit you. It benefits everyone you touch. There is a version of you that exists beyond the chaos. A version of you that doesn't take everything personally. That doesn't need to explain yourself. That doesn't react to every trigger. That version of you is not far away. It's waiting just beyond the pause. Beyond the moment you choose not to respond in anger. Beyond the deep breath you take instead of the words you want to yell. Every time you choose calm, you get closer to becoming that version. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Until one day, you're no longer forcing it. You've become it. But none of this happens by accident. You have to be intentional. You have to want something better. You have to be willing to disappoint the version of yourself that finds comfort in chaos, that craves the last word, that feeds off being right. You have to be willing to walk away from familiar patterns and choose a new way, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's lonely, even when no one else around you is doing it. Because eventually, someone will. Someone will see your example and follow your lead. And that's when the cycle breaks. That's when generational healing begins. That's when the legacy of peace begins to take root. And yes, you will be tested. Life will hand you situations that seem custom, designed to push you back into your old ways. People will misunderstand your silence and call it weakness. They'll try to provoke you just to prove they can. But each time you respond with calm, you're not losing. You're winning. You're not backing down, you're standing tall. You're not being passive, you're being powerful. You're taking control of your life in a way most people never will. And in doing so, you're giving others permission to do the same. This kind of power doesn't come from how much you can lift, or how loud you can shout. It comes from how still you can be when the world around you is spinning. How composed you can remain when everything in you wants to explode. That's the power that builds nations. That's the power that heals families. That's the power that ends generational pain. And it starts with you. So the next time someone tests your patience, the next time you're tempted to react, remember what's at stake. It's not just your pride. It's your peace. It's your growth. It's the example you're setting. It's the cycle you're breaking. It's the future you're shaping. Breathe, pause, choose, and let that choice speak louder than any argument ever could. You're not here to be ruled by emotion. You're here to master it. You're not here to repeat the past. You're here to transform it. And you're not here to win every battle. You're here to win the war within. When you do that, you become unshakable. And the ripple of your calm reaches farther than you'll ever know.